Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you to become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? Now, here's today's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast.
Hey, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden here. I just want to let you know I just had a really great conversation with Steve Ryder, who has been a co-host in the past here on the Gladden Longevity Podcast. We're talking about Men's Health Awareness Month and had a really fascinating conversation I think you're really going to love about optimizing male health. So enjoy that.
Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you become an age hacker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? I'm Steve Ryder, back for another monthly Q&A, which our schedules didn't exactly match up for the last month, maybe even 2. I don't remember. I don't remember the last one that we did, but Dr. Gladden, it is glad to be on a call with you again.
Yeah. It's good to see you again, Steve. Yeah, really great.
How's your summer been?
It's been active. It's been really good. It's kind of been amazing. You know, I got hurt last August and then had to rebuild my knee with 3 regenerative injections that we did here. And then I got to a point where this spring I was able to start running again and biking again. And now I've been doing a process to really boost NAD levels for myself, and energy levels are just off the charts. Like,
So what are you doing for building up the NAD?
Well, it's really a combination of taking several supplements, Nuchito Time, which is a really well-constructed NAD supplement in that it supports NAD in the cell through several different mechanisms. It blocks the breakdown of NAD. It increases the recycling of NAD, both of which go haywire as we age. We tend to have CD38, which breaks down NAD and is the highest affinity for NAD. And the NAMPT enzyme that recycles it also gets weaker. So it addresses both those issues and then supplies some niacin as a precursor for NAD. And that works well. But then we couple it with, it also has some apigenin in it to block the CD38. Then we couple that with the Vitality. And Vitality has different elements in it. It has some NMN, has some D-ribose.
Is it a capsule? Is it?
It's a wafer or a powder. The Nuchito is actually 6 capsules. We just had a call with them. Have figured out a way to condense it down into 3 capsules for the same dose. So that's coming soon. But combining those 2 is helpful. But I will say that in using either one, either alone or together, I would notice a bit of a boost, but not the way we are now. Because what we're doing now is we're combining it with an ozone sauna. So what we'll do is we'll jump in the ozone sauna. We'll have taken the supplements, jump in the ozone sauna. And what the ozone does is it basically oxidizes NADH. NAD actually basically is in 2 forms in your cells, NAD, the oxidized, and NADH, the reduced form. And it goes back and forth between those 2. So when you expose yourself to ozone in a sauna, you're actually oxidizing more of the NADH back to NAD. And we talk about NAD all the time, but it's really the ratio of NAD to NADH that's so critical. So when you have the precursors to make NAD and protect the recycling of NAD and block the degradation of NAD, and now you're oxidizing NADH back to NAD to change that ratio in a favorable way. Oh my gosh, you are literally 18 again. It's like I go out and I hammer these rides on my mountain bike or whatever. It's just nuts.
Yeah.
And if you want to, if you really want to get serious, you do plasmapheresis, which I'm also stacking in about every 3 weeks now. And then you do that after the plasmapheresis, and the effects will last. Seems like it lasts for weeks. I'm doing the ozone sauna now twice a week, just in general this way. But and the effects of what I've talked about with the ozone sauna and the supplements, and then taking the supplements daily afterwards, that effect will last for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, kind of thing, maybe. But with coupling with plasmapheresis, it's a couple weeks, 2.5 weeks, something like that. So anyway, the point is that you need NAD not only for energy production but for cellular repair. And so when you're combining all of this energy now with anything you want to rebuild, whether it's your knee, your brain, re-lengthening your telomeres, increasing autophagy with spermidine, which has now been shown to be one of the most powerful longevity supplements you can possibly take. You really sort of start to turbocharge this whole system. We can do a lot of great things from a longevity perspective, but if the system is being bogged down by low energy and high levels of inflammation, it's very difficult to actually get the thing going in the right direction, right? You're just kind of struggling with low energy production and a lot of inflammation. So the plasmapheresis, if you use senolytics before the plasmapheresis like we do, and then to kill the senescent cells, and then you do the plasmapheresis, you really clear out all the inflammation. Now you're boosting the energy production. So now you've actually put yourself back into a very youthful scenario where there's lower levels of inflammation, much higher levels of energy. The body can do what it's supposed to do in terms of healing, repairing, and the fun of life, right? Which is doing whatever activity you enjoy most. So that's fun. Yeah.
Well, a number of those supplements that you mentioned are available at the Gladden
They're all in the
Longevity
Gladden Longevity Shop. That's right. All of them are in there because we believe in them. And we believe in them because we've been using them and seeing how we can make them work. So,
I'd love one of these times for you to bring, like in a dish, your daily supplement routine, so that way listeners could go to YouTube or go to Facebook and see the amount of supplements that you take on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's always in flux, right? So the idea is, there are some people that are taking 150 pills a day. That's never been my, there's no trophies being handed out for how many supplements you can take, right? I think too many supplements it can be bad. It can be stressful on the body to try to assimilate all that stuff, right? So I try to do it as elegantly as possible. And maybe on the next one I will kind of go through what I'm doing, but to give people an idea, the way that I go about it is I space it out. So I get up and I take my thyroid in the morning. I do my meditation, my journaling, and things like that. I do my workout, come to the office, and then I'll take. I won't have eaten anything. I'm now taking spermidine in the morning because I'm already fasting. Exercise itself will induce autophagy if it's not weight training, right? Like cardio will help induce autophagy. And then I take the spermidine to kind of boost it even further. But the thing about spermidine is it actually works on virtually every hallmark of aging. It's not just autophagy. And so that's really, really exciting. So you do that. Then I take my AM supplements. And then I will probably have something to drink in the morning, usually with some powders in it, some fiber, some protein, things like that. And then I'll eat lunch. And when at lunch, I'll take my noon supplements. And I have some things that I take at a meal. I had my gallbladder taken out over 10 years ago. So I need to take some digestive things to compensate for that. So I do that. And I also, at that point, I'm taking things that actually rebuild the glycocalyx in the arteries, which is the key for arterial health. So we have a new way to measure that in the office, and a new supplement. Yeah. So we like the Glycocalyx Pro that we have a lot. It comes from an algae and rebuilds the glycocalyx. We did a study on it here in the office that demonstrated that. And we're adding to it now a new supplement called Revasca, which is building the glycocalyx through a second mechanism. So they complement each other. And so I do that at mealtime, because it's at mealtime that you're actually destroying your arteries. It's not that's really when we're breaking down the arteries, is while we're eating. So when you're rebuilding the glycocalyx in the context of a meal, then you're kind of preserving your arterial function. And so that works out really well. And then I'll take, some supplements at dinner, and then I take some before bedtime. So I kind of spread it out is what I do. And even the bedtime supplements, I may take some and go to bed. And then if I get up to go to the bathroom, which I do once a night, I'll take the rest of them. So I'm never like trying to take, it's not how many pills can I take, right? So spacing it out like that and combining it with food and stuff like that seems to make it work pretty well.
One of the things that I've absolutely taken away from this time that I've spent around you on the podcast is how you will cycle supplements in and out. So you'll intentionally be spending a little more time on, not adding testosterone, but really kind of focusing on, the longevity. And then there are times where you'll be a little more anabolic, if you will, in terms of cranking up that testosterone, doing these kinds of cycles between, muscle growth and really kind of trying to kick up autophagy to another level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think, economies or the biology is an economy of balance, right? So it's really about cycling in and out of these various states. You can't be building all the time or you die sooner. That's been shown over and over again. Power athletes die sooner. Everybody wants to talk about muscle as the currency of longevity. Well, if that were the case, bodybuilders and power athletes would live longer, but they die 10 years sooner. So, and I don't know if you just saw the data on the carnivore diet, but now that's been debunked as completely what we've always known. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You're getting all this protein, which is a massive strain on your kidneys, and all this methionine, which basically ages you. It's really not a healthy diet. Now, there are some people that benefit from it. There clearly are. There are people that just don't get along with plants and all that. And I get that. And, God bless everyone. Diet is very, very individualized. But to just kind of generally adopt that as, a high saturated fat diet, and higher riskers of colon cancer. There's just a lot to not be excited about eating meat all the time, right? So anyway, that's kind of interesting.
So this month, it is June Men's Health Month.
Go boys!
And we've got the Male Longevity Blueprint. So from your perspective, what are the most underestimated health risks men face as they age?
Not ejaculating often enough.
Ooh, yeah. Talk about that.
I think it's one of the, I won't make a comment. So somebody just walked across Steve's desk. Anyway.
Yes, my office has become a foster room. I'm back to fostering cats for a local cat rescue organization, and my pregnant mama to be just walked by. Her tail just walked by.
Yeah, so I think that from the standpoint of prostate health, men are at risk for prostate cancer, and the longer we live, the higher the risk is. And people talk about if you live long enough, you're going to get prostate cancer. We hope that that's not the case, but we do see quite a few men that have developed prostate cancer. And number one, it's important to know what your genetics are around that, right? So in my case, I actually have a gene where excess androgens, testosterone and things can increase the risk of prostate cancer for me. There's no history of prostate cancer in my family, but knowing that, there are things that I do that are pretty meticulous around taking care of the prostate. So I don't want to stay away from testosterone because I like a lot of the benefits: bone density, muscle mass, general resilience, robustness, libido comes on board. So all that's for the good. And yet I work to protect my prostate by doing things taking diindolylmethane to help me metabolize the testosterone down the safest pathways. I do things with genistein, which basically is an estrogen agonist. I don't want to basically knock down estrogen. I think one of the big mistakes that men make is getting on testosterone and trying to block estrogen production. Men need estrogen just as much as women need testosterone, and it's super healthy for your brain and your heart and your blood vessels, and it's actually better for your prostate. But you got to have the right metabolites coming through these hormonal pathways. When the hormones go in, your body's going to metabolize them to eventually, break them down and get rid of them. It happens, with everything. But you want to make sure they're going down the right pathways. And without knowing your genetics and then measuring how you're actually metabolizing it, I think that's a big hidden risk. So I would really encourage people to get, a test that looks at hormone metabolites. There are a couple of them out there now. The Dutch test, a lot of people have heard about, and now there's a Vibrant hormone zoomer that does a really great job of looking at this also. And you also want to get blood levels. So you need blood levels. And the problem with most T clinics is they're getting blood levels, but that's all they're testing. They have no idea what the metabolites are doing, which means you don't have really any idea how much risk you're putting your prostate at. And since people don't know their genetics, they don't really know if it's a risk to them in the first place or not. So you can see you're kind of playing with fire when you want to be not playing with fire. You want to be, doing good things. So all that's super important. But it's been shown that men that have over 20 ejaculations a month have a significantly lower incidence of prostate cancer. And so it's really, really important. I think a lot of men, as they go through life, they get in relationships or they're not in relationships, and relationships can, the flame can sort of die or whatever it is, and a lot of people end up in lower sex activity relationships or situations than they would like to be, but they kind of acquiesce to it. And I think it actually represents a big health risk for men. It's not only mental health, because I think men feel better when we're able to be sexually active. It's a beautiful thing. It's not a physical act. It's really a psycho-spiritual connection with an individual, right? And so having that really sweet connection that's very nurturing and loving and giving and receiving and, all the above is incredibly salutary for us, right? And it really releases a lot of oxytocin. And oxytocin is a molecule that has a massive number of longevity benefits also. So we're built for emotional closeness and sexual activity. And then ejaculations are incredibly helpful for protecting the prostate. So I think a lot of men, even men that are interested in longevity, have kind of acquiesced to the fact that they're just not going to have as much sexual activity as they did when they were 18. And yet they should be. They actually should be, one way or another, right? They should be having activity. So I think that's really, really important to understand. And then when you think about that, well, what does it take? Well, you need to have libido, right? So having some DHEA on board, having testosterone on board, those are things that push libido. Dihydrotestosterone, you need some of that, but not too much, because that bothers your prostate also. Can enlarge it, can increase the risk of prostate cancer. So again, you've got to get everything just right. But when you do that, and your libido comes up, then you find yourself in a position, but then you've got to have vascular function to support that. So this is where the glycocalyx is so important. The real root cause of cardiovascular disease is the destruction of the glycocalyx. And if you're not familiar with what it is, it's kind of like the fuzz that grows on the bottom of a river. So if you imagine your artery like a pipe, and the outside of the pipe is fairly tough, that's the adventitia, that's the fibrous tissue that kind of holds it in together, if you will. It's like if you were to run over your hose with a lawnmower and it had a tough outer coating, you wouldn't really cut it. So that's the piece. And then inside that is a muscle layer, which can either constrict to narrow the artery or relax to expand the artery, right? And if you're having sexual function or sexual activity, you need to actually have that the muscle relax to allow blood flow to go into the genital area. And same for women. And so if the glycocalyx which is this fuzz now that grows on the inner lining of the hose, right? It's kind of think of it as a sensory organ for blood flow. So as blood flows by, the glycocalyx is kind of waving in that breeze of that water flowing by, and it signals the artery that, hey, blood flow is increasing. We need to increase nitric oxide production. So it signals the lining of the artery, the skin that lines the artery, the endothelium, to produce nitric oxide. So having a healthy glycocalyx is critical, but then having the ability to back it up with the ability to make nitric oxide. So you have the healthy glycocalyx with the Glycocalyx Pro and the Revasca. Those two supplements together are magical because they're working at the problem from two different angles, and they really work amazingly well. And then you've got to make nitric oxide. Well, the way you make nitric oxide is not by eating steak. You actually get dietary nitrate out of plants. So spinach, arugula, kale, beets, and things like this. And if you're sensitive to oxalates, some of those plants are high in oxalates, like kale. So maybe you want to use more arugula. So you can figure these things out. But the point is, getting some plant stuff in is super important. Then not using mouthwashes is super important, because when you eat those plants and you get that dietary nitrate in, it recycles through your saliva into your mouth. And if you're using mouthwashes that are killing the bacteria, you don't have the right bacteria in there to actually take that dietary nitrate and turn it into nitrite, which you then swallow and use that to actually make nitric oxide. So cut out the mouthwashes for sure. And some xylitol toothpaste will actually improve the oral flora, or there's actually oral probiotics out there now. We have one in our shop also that can improve this.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so now you basically have filled the tank with dietary nitrate. You've got a healthy glycocalyx. Well, if you use a product like N101, which then triggers the body to make nitric oxide right now you're really good. And if you still want to go even further, you can take Viagra, or you can take Cialis on top of that. And that now becomes a killer app. And if you really want to crush it, then you use some melanotan 2, right? Or some PT141, a peptide that will actually improve not only libido, but sexual function. And if you stack that in together, that's, you'll live on a different planet. So it's pretty amazing. Now, you can't use the peptides all that often, like maybe every 2 weeks or every 2.5 weeks, because you develop a tolerance to them fairly quickly. Okay. But in general, using the supplements alone, with or without a PDE5 inhibitor like Cialis or Viagra, can work great. And then if you want to add to that, you can. And if it's like, we're going to go have a special weekend, then here we go, right? So it can be really quite lovely. So, but I think for men to give up on their sexual health or their sex life, feeling like, well, it's just not possible for me because my partner's not willing, right? I think that's really a tragedy. And I think that you're really sacrificing your health at that point, really sacrificing your health. Prostate cancer risk, emotional satisfaction, co-creating with another person, the oxytocin hits that come from that. So anyway, I think that's often overlooked. We want to talk about blood pressure and cardiovascular and testosterone itself and bone density and muscle mass and all that. That's all lovely. But at the end of the day, all that comes along for the ride if you're really sexually active. So, yeah.
When you were describing that smooth muscle in our arteries and capillaries, etc., that expands and contracts, what factor? I mean, there are lots of health benefits for sauna, detoxification, etc., but do saunas and cold plunges help to exercise those capillaries and blood vessels, etc.? Is there a health benefit in that?
Well, it's a good question. When they did the sauna data in I think it was Finland, and got published, I think, in 2015, they looked at a little over 3,000 men for 20 years between the ages of 40 and 60. And they found that the men that did 4 or more saunas a week at a temperature of 180 degrees or above for 20 minutes was actually 19 minutes, but call it 20. that they had a significant reduction in cardiovascular events, like a 50% reduction. They had an even greater reduction in dementia, 60%, right? And then they had a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality, and cancer was in there as well, right? So, yes, doing saunas seems to have a massive cardiovascular benefit. And so there's, if you want to stack that into that layer, I think that's really wonderful. It does increase blood flow. It does help with detox. The heat shock proteins are incredibly helpful for longevity in general because they're helping you to chaperone the proper folding of proteins, which goes awry as we age. But the increased blood flow is super helpful. There have been studies done with infrared saunas in Japan that have shown that people with angina, right, chest pain related to blocked coronary arteries, arteries in the heart, will improve their angina scores, their walk scores. Even people with congestive heart failure can walk further and have less shortness of breath. And people that have blockages in their legs can actually walk further using sauna. And we also have access to a product now out of Australia called Cavadex, which we're putting into a study here that is cyclodextran that has the ability to actually pull cholesterol out of plaque. That's the exciting news. The less exciting news is you take it as an enema and you do it every day for 60 or 90 days and kind of see what kind of impact you've had. But, for somebody that's struggling with blocked arteries, when you start to stack all these things together, right, now you're really creating a great environment for vascular health. Yeah.
This month is also National Safety Month, how everyday habits could be shortening your health span. So what are some surprising lifestyle habits that may be aging us faster without us realizing it?
I don't know. When I went to school, maybe this was true for you, but when I went to school in elementary school, we had safeties. Do you remember that? And they would wear these straps across the front and a belt. I don't know if you had that. And
No.
The safeties were there to get all the kids to line up properly and be quiet before we went into school. Anyway, when you said safety, National Safety Month, I flashed on. Well, those guys are finally getting recognition. I have to tell you, I never wanted to be a safety. I was always the kid that I wasn't a troublemaker, but it's like, I don't want to be that person. Right. So, anyway, that's interesting, but National Safety Month, I think, what's interesting, is that we hurt ourselves a lot. Obvious things like seatbelts and all that sort of stuff. I think one of the best ways to stay safe, however, apart from avoiding stupid things, right? Like watch this and then, I'm going to do a gainer off a boat or something, smash my head on the side of the boat or something crazy. So I think, I think you want to use judgment in those things, but I really think that the biggest thing that we can do to stay safe, and this is physically safe, there's psycho, spiritual, emotional things there as well, of course, but to stay physically safe is to train our nervous systems. And I think that that's missing most of the time. I really kind of have changed my whole outlook on working out, that it almost has nothing to do with the muscles anymore. It almost has nothing to do with the cardiovascular system. It really has to do with training my nervous system. And when I'm like yesterday, I did a Vasper, you're seated in a new step and you have the cuffs on your legs and your arms and you're kind of going back and forth. We have a tendency when we're working out to focus on the muscle, how the muscle feels, how hard the muscle's working. And I've actually switched my focus from that into the fluidity of the motion and my nervous system and how it's working. Is my stride all the way back with my arm and all the way forward? Is there a complete stroke there running the same way? Is there a complete stride? And then what's the rhythm of that stride and what's the pace of that stride? And that's all controlled by the nervous system. And so I find myself moving my focus from what the muscle is doing or what's happening with the muscle into my nervous system and simply focusing on that. And I've also tapped into, I don't know if you're familiar with 0 point energy. Does that ring a bell for you?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So, in the quantum field, And they're discovering so many interesting things with quantum computing chips, Maharana chip and the Willow chip and the JWST. I mean, everything you ever thought you knew about physics or astronomy, it's like, think again. So, but anyway, in the quantum field, basically particles are coming into and out of existence. Light is basically coming into existence and going out of existence. So the idea in the old creation story that from nothing things were created, this is being shown to be in physics now. From nothing, literally from nothing, just from the quantum wave fields, particles are coming into existence and going back out. And that occurs even at absolute zero, when every other motion in a macroscopic space has basically stopped, right? That's the definition of absolute zero. But there's still this energy going on at the quantum level of these particles coming in and out of existence. So that's called 0 point energy. And there's a substance called Nyrite that's been developed. It's here on the planet. It's not alien technology or anything. It's actually here, Nyrite. And it can actually capture and harness 0 point energy. So this would be free energy for, the entire planet. And there's a lot of work being done in that area. But the point is that I kind of work with this thought process, this mental construct that I have access to 0 point energy. And so when I'm on the Vasper, when I'm running, when I'm on the mountain bike, when I'm on the elliptical, whatever I'm doing, lifting a weight, I tap into 0 point energy and I feel it sort of coming up through the bottom of my spine, this little Kundalini type, coming up through the chakras and out the top of my head. And I that's my energy supply. So my focus is completely away from the muscle. It's just like I'm pulling in 0 point energy from the quantum field, and I'm only focused on what my nervous system is doing. You could try this on a hike. I know you like to hike. Mm-hmm. Just don't focus on the muscles at all. Just focus on your nervous system, the rhythm of your stride, the length of your stride, the smoothness of the nervous system. And what I find is that I go faster with less effort. I generate more power with less effort than if I'm focused on the muscle. So when I'm trying, like we think to exercise is somehow to try. And I actually think that exercise, when it's well done, is not trying. It's actually doing. And it's actually kind of being in that flow. It's analogous to if you've ever hit a baseball or a great tennis shot or a great golf shot or kicked a soccer ball and it felt great, or threw the perfect football pass or whatever your game is, right? When you do that, a golf ball for that matter, right? It feels effortless, right? If you hit a perfect, I don't know if you play any of those sports, but if you do that stroke and you hit the ball perfectly, it feels effortless. And that's because in that moment, your entire nervous system was just completely dialed in, and it was effortless. You weren't trying hard. You hit the ball a long way, but it wasn't because you were trying. It was because your nervous system was dialed in. And I think we can sort of take that analogy and use it, because I think that when you focus on your nervous system like this, and then you actually challenge the nervous system with balance challenges, whether it's balance boards or standing on one leg or slack lines or whatever else, doing figure eights with your eyes open and your eyes closed, frontwards and backwards, you're challenging your nervous system. This is how you actually make yourself really safe. Because when you do get knocked off your skis or your snowboard, you know how to tumble. You don't break your collarbone. You don't get beat up, because your nervous system is already adapted to what's coming. And so I think this is really the ultimate hack on how to stay safe. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to start to focus on this, because this weekend, a lifelong buddy of mine has been like a brother. His wife and daughter are coming out. We're going to be tackling the Manitou Incline.
Okay.
And for those listeners that don't know the Manitou Incline, it's a little hiking trail, only 1 mile in Manitou Springs, Colorado, that basically goes straight up a mountain.
Right.
And it's 1 mile with a 2,000-foot elevation gain. So it's a butt kicker.
That is a butt kicker.
But it's an incredible, it's amazing. Every time I've ever completed it, it's just, wow, I really did something big. And
right. That's awesome.
And by the time I'm back down, I take Bar Trail back down, because it's much safer than heading all the way down. In fact, they recommend that they tell people not to go down, even though some people do. My movement circle on my Apple Watch is completely full. So I've
Mm-hmm.
gotten all my movement done that I need for the day in just that one little hike.
Yeah, maybe for the week. Who knows? So, no, that's really interesting. So when you get on that hike, I want you to focus on only focusing on your nervous system and pulling 0 point energy up through your spine, out the top of your head, and only focus on the fluidity of your stride, right? And that the kick out the back is as far as it needs to be, and the arm swing is what it needs to be, and the whole thing. And if you just focus on that, I'll be really curious to hear your report back. In fact, give me a call or a text this weekend and let me know how that went. Yeah,
I will definitely do that. I will
cool.
definitely do that. World Blood Donor Day was June 14th.
Okay.
There's a theory that blood donation may help reduce excess iron or inflammation. What's your take?
Absolutely. Donating blood is super healthy. Donating plasma is super healthy. So, we talk about doing plasmapheresis here, where we pull the blood out, we spin it to get the cells to settle down. And on the top will be the liquid portion of the blood called the plasma, where all the proteins are. And a lot of the inflammatory proteins are in the plasma. So we throw the plasma away, and we can actually, depending on a person's size, but in my case, we take 3 liters of that plasma and throw it away, right? Which is
Wow.
pretty good volume, right? And we swap it with saline and albumin, which is albumin being the primary protein in the blood, so that the oncotic pressure remains the same, and the cells don't swell and all that kind of thing. So, but you go back and you do that, and it's a great way to get rid of those inflammatory markers. Well, if you donate plasma, you can donate 200 cc's of plasma, right? So that's 200 cc's. 1 liter is 1,000 cc's. So that's a fifth of a liter. So that would be a 15th of what I'm able to do in a plasmapheresis machine. And yet you can donate plasma twice a week. So, and they pay you to do it, right? You have to pay us to do the plasmapheresis, but they'll pay you to do the plasma donation. So I think it's like $80 or $70 or whatever they pay you. So um, you can donate plasma twice a week, and you actually start to get ahead of the curve. It takes more time, but you start to get ahead of the curve on inflammation. And if you're taking some senolytics and then you donate, right, you can start to get ahead. And maybe you can't go twice a week. Maybe you don't have time for that. So you can go once a week, or you can only go once every 2 weeks. Whatever you can do, it's helpful. And
Yeah.
donating whole blood is also helpful. You're getting rid of old cells, red cells, white cells, some plasma. It's going to be about 40% cells and about 60% plasma. In Colorado, maybe more like 42 or 45% cells, because you got more red cells up there. Um, and then you throw that away, and now your body has to use iron stores, has to remake new blood cells. The body likes to be challenged with these things about rejuvenating itself. It keeps the body young to do that. So, you can't lop off a pound of muscle and have your leg regrow it, but you can throw away a unit of blood, or donate it, and initiate your body's rejuvenation cycle. So yes, donating blood is super healthy, and then donating plasma is super healthy as well. So either of those would be great. Yeah.
Finally, PTSD and Mental Health Awareness Month.
Hmm.
How does unresolved trauma, including PTSD, influence long-term health outcomes?
Man, it has a massive impact, right? Massive impact. I mean, if you're suffering from PTSD, which really manifests itself with anxiety, depression, low energy, fear, um, high sympathetic nervous system tone, right? Which you can measure on your Apple Watch or Oura Ring or Whoop or Garmin or whatever as heart rate variability. Heart rate variability shrinks. The way that I explain it to people is that heart rate variability is the distance between two beats. The heart beats, time lapses, another beat occurs, time lapses, another beat occurs. So there's a distance or a time between those beats. And when you're very relaxed and zen, everything gets kind of sloppy. Like the beat is now, and then it waits a while, it beats again. We'll beat now. We'll beat a little. We'll beat now. So there's a little sloppiness to it, and that's actually good. It's a high heart rate variability implies that you're relaxed and your parasympathetic nervous system's in charge. But when you're under stress, by gosh, everybody's marching, right? Boom, 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 boom. So there's very little variability, and that's bad because that means your system is carrying a lot of stress. So with PTSD, people tend to carry a lot of hidden stress. They normalized it because they feel like they always feel. It's like, no, I feel normal, or I know I have some PTSD, but today it's not bad, right? So it's like I feel pretty normal. But if we measure them and test them, and we have a way to do that here in the office with a neurocheck, we can hook them up to a couple of clips on their wrists, and in about 6 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes, we can actually get a whole detailed analysis of their nervous system that way. And with that, we see that people that have really been under significant stress for one reason or another are carrying that stress in their systems. And we know that stress ages people, right? If you look at most of the presidents, they aged a lot in 4 years, right? So stress ages us a lot. So when you're carrying all that stress, whether you recognize it or not, you're aging. So being able to clear that stress up is super important. And that's where actually treating PTSD becomes very important. I think it's really trauma that gets imprinted into the nervous system that causes PTSD. And then we end up living in reaction to whatever it was, whether we were, in the military or whether there was some sort of emotional violence or, bullying or physical violence or, whatever happens, we're traumatized by it on some level, and it gets imprinted into the nervous system. And so the way to sort that out is to, number one, do some deep therapeutic work where you really, really dissect it, really start to understand what happened, what your role was, what other people's roles were, and then actually understand how it did impact you. And so that you really recognize, okay, this is really impacting me. Then from there, you actually start to be able to actually forgive the people involved, even start to make some reparations if that's required, but you start to be able to heal it. But my feeling is that with PTSD, it was basically imprinted by an experience, and that software can only be overwritten by another experience. And it's great to do the cognitive work to understand it and do all those things, but it's not enough to solve it. And that's where things like, the military, a lot of military people are now using things like Ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT. And Texas just passed a law here allowing Ibogaine to be used for veterans here. And, Texas is a little more conservative state than, say, Colorado or California, but nonetheless, there's wisdom in these decisions. And so the use of psychedelics, psilocybin, LSD, 5-MeO, MDMA, ayahuasca, Ibogaine, all these different medicines, and they all have particular roles for particular people at particular times in their journey. But the point is, they have the ability to actually allow you to have a different experience, and in that different experience of experiencing love and joy and connection and purpose, has the ability to actually go in and rewrite the software. And I think that's really exciting. So it's a real thing, and it happens for so many people that wouldn't say I don't have PTSD, but in actual fact they do. I've had PTSD from things I've gone through, and I didn't recognize it as that. I just thought it was a rough time. But you carry that with you, right? And then being able to go in and heal that becomes super important. So when you free yourself from that, now you're kind of liberated yourself, you're unencumbered. Now your nervous system can calm back down. You not only can do that, but now you're motivated to actually do things that are actually healthy, and engage with life again, right? Have more oxytocin flow or whatever it is, or less alcohol or less nicotine or whatever other thing you're doing. So, So anyway, that's how I see it.
I would also think, though, for listeners that aren't interested in psychedelics, or they're not able to travel to a state or a country where you are able to do it, I would assume tools like neuro-emotional technique, which Dr. Howard Cohn, a past
Oh,
guest,
sure.
has talked
Yeah.
about, could
Yep.
definitely be a benefit. I know
That's
when
right.
I visited Howard at his clinic, at his chiropractic office in Southern
Yeah.
California, I felt like I was on top of the world after the work that I had done. And then he introduced me to somebody here locally that I'd also worked with. So those
Yeah.
kinds of things, energy work is something else that
That's right.
I've done that I found some definite benefit from. What about brain frequency over at Gladden Longevity
Yeah,
in
brain frequency works great. This is basically transcranial magnetic stimulation that can go in and actually help reprogram and re-energize the brain, particularly when it's done in conjunction with hydrogen and certain peptides to increase brain-derived neurotrophic factors, so new connections can grow in the brain. And you do it in conjunction with some cognitive therapy. We have not combined it with psychedelics. It's not legal for us to do it here in the office. We know people that can do it, in a legal setting, but we haven't combined the two here. That's something for us to think about.
you got to bring the equipment out here to Colorado on one of your trips so we can
There you go. Yeah,
we can do some studies on this. Come
we
on.
can do
Come
some
on.
studies. Yeah, what are we talking about? I mean, of course. Yeah. So anyway, very interesting. Tell the audience a little bit more about your experience when you went to California with your neuromuscular reprogramming or whatever it was.
Yeah, neuro-emotional technique. So if listeners go
Neuroemotional
back
technique.
into the podcast archives and search for Dr. Howard Cohn, Cohn, there he talks a lot about the history of neuro-emotional technique, and basically it's muscle testing in terms of identifying whether it's something physiologically that's going on or whether it's something emotionally going on, and starting to work through some of those triggers and releasing. And I'm telling you, when I first did it at Dr. Howard Cohn's clinic in, I think it's in Irvine, maybe it's
Okay.
just outside of John Wayne. It's not that far away from,
Okay.
I know it's in
Orange
Orange County, Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
He and I went out for a meal and some cigars afterwards, and I felt like I was like something had just lifted. I felt free. I felt just a levity that
I love it.
just a level was unlocked, and I felt that way for literally a couple days afterwards.
Yeah.
And I felt those kinds of things even when working with the NET practitioner here in Colorado Springs.
Yep.
It's something that, I just felt like just little unlocks that didn't necessarily,
That's right.
It wasn't like sitting in a therapist office after the death of my wife where I'm going through grief counseling and all this. It was just something super quick, 20 minutes and boom, I'm out, and whoa, the world just seems a little brighter, and I feel lighter. And
yeah, I love that. There's also, it's important for the audience to understand that these traumas, while they're held in the nervous system, they're also held in the body. And so working with someone that's skilled, either like Mukti's been working with a guy.
Somatic work.
California, somatic work. That's apparently I've not yet met him or had an opportunity to work with him, but he's apparently incredibly gifted at being able to detect where people are holding things in their body, whether it's in their hip or their neck or their back or their shoulder or wherever it might be. And then basically working with sort of different techniques and myofascial things and cupping and things like that to help kind of release some of the trauma. So if you really want to become your unencumbered self, it's a combination of not just sort of talk/insightful therapy, not just even psychedelic reprogramming. There's also kind of the realignment, if you will, of the physicality, the bone structures, the alignment there, the fascial planes and things like that, to actually really get this to be a complete healing process. It really is a complete healing process that you have to go through. But it's so worth it, because when you get to the other side and you feel unencumbered and you feel like, oh my gosh, it's great. It's great to be alive. It's great to be Jeff, right? It's great to be Steve. It's like, let's go do something cool. So, it's really a beautiful place to live. And I think I think that's what I want for every man that's listening to this, is to become their unencumbered selves and be able to really step into the fullness of you could call it the divine masculine. You could call it the full expression of who they are as a man on the planet. That would be the goal for me.
Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, thanks for letting me jump on again for another monthly Q&A.
Yeah, I loved it. Nice to have the conversation.
Be sure to go to gladdenlongevity.com, learn more about what Dr. Gladden does at the Gladden Longevity Clinic there in the Dallas area. And be sure to go to gladdenlongevityshop.com for a whole bunch of those supplements that we had talked about. I'll be sure to text you after with pictures from the top of the Manitou Incline this weekend.
Oh, I can't wait. I hope you have a great hike. All right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If you would like more information on what we've discussed or other topics, please reference the show notes or go to gladdenlongevitypodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by searching Gladden Longevity. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to get future episodes delivered to you and share our podcast or this episode with someone in your life that you may find benefit. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. The Gladden Longevity Podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The use of any information and materials linked to this podcast is at the listener's own risk.